and welcome to the Dark Side. We are happy that you join us here on the Dark Side on Sunday evening. I hope that those of you who are on Facebook, remember that you need permission from Facebook to comment on StreamYard so that we can see your comments, which is really important to us. What we are going to be doing this evening is we are going to try to go in lightning speed round the news stories. And there are so many that we want to make sure that we catch as many as we possibly can. So I'm going to get right into it. The Storm is with us and he'll join us as we go along. All right, so the first story that we're going to do today is out of Norway. It is shootings that took place in Oslo on Friday night, Saturday morning, depending on your definition of that. It was at 1:15 a.m. A gunman opened fire on a LGBTQIA venue and shot 21 people. 10 were seriously injured and 2 people have died, I think it is, as current numbers stand. What is interesting is how the story, of course, a shooting of this nature in Europe is very rare. We don't have the same gun policies, so it sends shockwaves throughout Europe when these things happen. And so this particular person was known to the security services. He had a strong history of mental health issues that were well known and well documented. And it seems that he's been radicalized is the term that they would use for it, and has been preyed upon by the look of it. If you've got such well-documented mental health issues, you know, this is one of the things that we see across the globe, is that people radicalize people with these and take advantage of the weaker. And so this person has gone out and has caused this devastation and lives have been lost. It caused Norway to cancel their Gay Pride March, which resulted in people coming out and doing sort of a subsidiary, you know, kind of off the books thing to say that they weren't going to be afraid and they were going to stand for their rights. It's really sad to see that this is happening. What's nice is that the leaders in Norway have responded with these sorts of statements, which is we must stand together. Freedom, diversity, and respect for each other is important to our values. We need to stand together. And I think that was lovely because, you know, oftentimes you hear the narrative that it's the headline actually read, Norway attack being treated as an Islamist terrorism. But when you actually read the Norwegian reports, it's slightly different and has a slightly different feel to it, and does talk about his mental health issues, does talk about all of those sorts of aspects. So the Norwegian people are really treating this in a tone that is different to the rest of the world, even though the rest of the world's headlines will read very differently, of course. But yeah, so I think our hearts go out to all of those who are dealing with the loss of loved ones, and also, of course, who are affected by the shootings, in addition to the fact that we're glad to see the response that has come forward from Norway. Any thoughts on this one? Not really. Good. Okay, well then moving on. A story that we covered before. I really wanted to catch you up on this story. Shireen Abu Akla. I need to speak slower so I don't trip over my words. That's always important. If you remember, she was the Al Jazeera journalist that was shot, and the investigations have now, she's been killed. And, you know, we covered it when we were talking about her funeral, and kind of the pictures and images and the way that the people were being treated as they grieved were just awful. So now the investigations have happened. Israel is not going to conduct a criminal investigation, even though somebody's been murdered, which I think speaks volumes. Israel has decided that after investigating it, they cannot determine which side shot her. That was their conclusion after their investigation. The Palestinian investigation says it was intentional and it was done by an Israeli. The UN has now come out with a report independently and says they have found that the bullets fired came from Israeli troops. And so this really brings up questions about people's behavior. What really strikes me about this is that Israel is really following in kind of the steps of the USA in some ways. And they are taking the line that we are not going to do a criminal investigation, even though someone has been murdered, a journalist who has rights and is protected around the world because of the rights of journalists and freedom of speech and the right to report, etc., etc., etc. They're refusing to conduct an investigation, a criminal investigation. Instead, did an internal investigation, and then that's the end of that, as far as they're concerned. The UN have now come out and said differently, and we'll see what steps are taken there. It would be good to see the international community come out and fully condemn the government there and say this is not acceptable. It is not acceptable that your government actually covers up the murders of press. She was an American journalist reporting there for Al Jazeera. So this story is ongoing, and I'm sure this will continue to cause unrest. Any thoughts in this? You're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, I was on mute because my initial words probably weren't suitable for air. No one's really surprised by this.
No.
Not only was she of a Arabic background, but she was a woman. And this week's events have shown us the US really doesn't care about women. But we'll get into that later. Yeah, I'm not surprised by this. I don't expect anything to come out of this. Once again, I would simply highlight the difference in approach that the US has taken towards the murder of one of its civilians who is a journalist in a war zone. And when it's a woman as well, right? Because if you remember in Ukraine a few weeks ago, a white male journalist was killed, and they called it a war crime and condemned Putin and the Russian government. I have no faith that any such or similar condemnation is going to go towards Israel. And look, I think people need to be clear on this, that the US politically does not do the right thing, right? Because here's the thing, the Israel in many ways operates as the bastard child of the US, right? Or if you've watched Game of Thrones, then you can look at Israel as Ramsay Bolton.
Well, that was too far into the seasons for me. Way too far into the season.
Well, anyone who's read the books or watched the series will know who
you'll understand that reference. Good, excellent. Right. Shall we move on?
Look, the US has the ability to put pressure on Israel to stop what it is doing, and refuses to do so.
Yeah,
that's the bottom line.
Yeah, and I think it's really sad that we're not going to see the universal condemnation. The UN has been very clear about what it is. They've stopped short of saying it was intentional, but they have at least said they know exactly who it was that shot her. It's the Israeli forces. But there's the fact that there's no criminal investigation, the fact that there is not, I mean, it barely made the news. I had to really search for it, to be honest, right? You barely hear it. I know it's been a news-filled weekend, but this report just dropped, and I think this is important that people see the difference in the way that you're, as you said, highlighting the journalist killed in Ukraine versus the journalist killed in Israel. Yeah,
but I think that's why you had to search for it, because nobody expected any different. If there was something different, if the US had actually condemned Israel for this, I assure you it would have been all over the news.
Maybe indeed. Okay, well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. The report is hot off the press. We'll see how it goes.
No, I'll put it to you like this. No, just to put it to you like this, in terms of how the political landscape goes. Remember, in Obama's last term in office, one of the last things he did in the UN was have the U.S. ambassador abstain in a vote that denounced Israel. And that was massive news.
Yes,
You
I
have to
remember that.
understand, if it
Yes,
was that big a deal for them simply to
yes,
abstain, and that was
yes,
the closest they would ever come to a condemnation. If they were
yes,
to
I remember
actually
that.
come out and condemn Israel,
Yes.
that is front page news. That actually has a potential to knock Wade versus Roe off of front pages.
Well, that's true. That's true. Well, let's move on to our third story. I'm on third story number 3. This is how much news has come out this weekend. It's ridiculous. This whole week has been just full of stuff. But this week, this is a story that starts actually 30 years ago with a bust, a statue, a piece of art being stolen from the Nigerian museum in. Oh, I've got the name here. Jos Museum. Please, my Nigerian friends, don't come for me. I love you all. This is what it is. But the Jos Museum had a piece of art stolen from them. Well, they had several pieces of art. They immediately informed UNESCO, which is the world kind of system. It was listed.
United Nations heritage thing.
Something. So it's listed, it's openly listed as these are stolen items. And then things go quiet for some time. And in 2017, it turns up in an auction. No, in 2007, in fact, it turns up in an auction for confiscated items. Now, it turns up in Belgium in an auction for confiscated items. And the Belgians say that they don't know the full details and they will investigate how they received it. But it was sold for a measly 200 euros plus tax. Okay. In 2017, the person who bought it finally tries to sell it because realizes that they bought it for it was sold by an auctioneer, so they want to sell it. In 2017, it was sold or attempted to be sold to Woolly and Wolls auction house, the auctioneers in 2017. At that point, it's realized that this is the stolen artifact. Now, bear in mind, 30 years. In 2007, the Belgians have exactly the same amount of information as Woolly and Wolls. The Woolly and Wolls are so afraid that they have this art piece, which is worth in excess of 20 million. They are like, the guy who has to hand it over to the police sleeps with it in his house. So you have to understand the value of this thing to the Nigerian government, to the Nigerian people. Even the British auction house realizes what it is. The police take custody of it, and it has remained in custody and is not being returned to their people. I had some questions. I did some digging, and nothing I turned up was satisfactory. There were no answers that I could find that were satisfactory as to why this hasn't been returned to the Nigerian people. They are processing it under. There are some questions about the ownership of the item. Well, first of all, the guy who actually bought it in 2007, bought it in good faith. He may not have known this. He paid £200 for it. Give him his £200, 200 euros. Done. Loss is over. He hasn't spent any money on this. This item is not anything to him. William Walls really don't have any reason to have it either, because they immediately knew that there was a problem and turned it over to the police. So exactly what is the ownership issue that you're dealing with here? Is the ownership issue that you refuse to return artworks, even when stolen in recent times? This was stolen back in 1987. There we got people who watch this who were born in 1987. People, this was not long ago. You don't want to return things that were stolen, listed at UNESCO, return the item. The British police are looking after it properly. How do British police know how to look after art pieces that are worth in excess of 20 million? Return it to the Nigerian people, return it to the Jos Museum back in central Nigeria. They need their stuff back. Thank you. And you know what? Do a proper investigation and find the other 10 pieces that were stolen. Just saying. Go ahead, Mr. Storm.
Right. Before I start, in solidarity with my Nigerian peoples out there, all my friends and stuff, Wakanda forever. Right. Now, listen.
Yeah.
Listen, on a serious note, look, this is just a whole bunch. You said you couldn't find a satisfactory
Satisfactory answer.
answer. Yes, you can. It's called white supremacy.
Yeah, but that's
It's
not a
called
satisfactory answer. It's
it's called
illegal what you're doing.
colonialism. No, as in terms of it's not going to make you feel good, but in terms of answering why you're in the situation you are, well, this is it. So, for example, you know, we know that people are still making claims on art pieces that were stolen from Jews during World War II. And it doesn't matter that somebody legitimately bought the piece from an auction house or through a private sale.
Mhm,
Doesn't
mhm.
matter.
Yep.
Those pieces are being
Um,
taken and
and given
returned to
to
the
the people
original owner,
as they should.
right? Got no problem with that. Absolutely none. That's their property. It
That's
was
what they
stolen from
should do.
them. It should be returned to
And
them,
pick up this Nigerian piece and send it right back where it come from.
right?
This don't belong to you.
Right. But here's the thing. Do the British want to return anything that they've ever stolen? Because their museums are littered with stolen stuff,
Yeah, that's
right?
a show for a whole entire other time.
Right. So but one of the troubling things that comes across in this story
Yeah,
is the condescending, paternalistic nature of colonialism. So one of the British um, authorities who was questioned about this, his response as to one of the reservations of returning it to Nigeria was that they couldn't look after it properly because it was stolen the first time,
by you. Sorry.
right? So because it was stolen, it shouldn't be returned because you don't know how to look after it. If I go and rob a bank, nobody's turning around and saying, well, I don't have to return the money because they couldn't look after it in the first place, could they?
Oh, it's not your business. It really isn't your. It's really
Right?
frightening, the kind of colonial mentality.
It's their property. Give it back to them, you know? And
Yeah.
listen, if the Nigerians wanted to go all Killmonger on the British, I couldn't blame them. Give me back my stuff.
Listen, I think as you say, the insulting thing is all of this colonial rhetoric. You didn't really know it was art. It wasn't art until we had it. You don't value it. You didn't look after it. Blah 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 blah. Let me just stop you with all of your colonial racist systemic issues right there and say, it doesn't matter. It's theirs. It doesn't belong to you. Give back the property. Did you not learn that as a child? If it don't belong to you, give it back. Did you take something that belongs to someone else? Give it back. Who you take it from, give it back. It's not your business. I don't care if they turn around and smashed every single piece. It's not my business. It's not your business. You don't have no business telling people who own the thing that they can't have it because you don't trust them. So, what?
No, but as I said, it's for me, it's the rank hypocrisy of it all. There's a
Listen,
whole system. There's
let
a
me, let me
whole
just, you see this? This is
yeah.
a turtle my daughter made for us, right? This is the little turtle.
Oh, that's what it was.
It's
Okay.
yeah, it's a turtle. Can you tell now? Is it
I,
better?
I can tell now.
You can tell now it's a turtle, right? It's a little piece of artwork that she loves. Now, on the good pieces, we like to fold them and put them in folders, and I keep them because memories. But my daughter likes her artwork. She wants to keep her artwork. So now the turtle is missing a tail and it's missing a leg, right? I have the two things here. The tail and the leg are there. Let me tell you something. I have a right to even tell my young child that she don't have business holding her own things because she's going to break it. It's hers. If she break it, she break it. It's not mine. I didn't spend the time to glue the thing together, make the thing. It's not my property. She made it. She created it. It's hers. Y'all just are not learning this very valuable lesson. Clearly, we need to treat you like toddlers. You make it? No, it's not yours. Give it back.
Listen, I look forward to the day, and in fact, the police would love it when it makes their job easier. Somebody calls up and says, "Look, my house was broken into and they stole stuff," and the police just turn around and say, "Well, you couldn't look after it in the first place. Sucks to be you."
I've had my house broken into. I did not appreciate the fact that I had stuff stolen.
I'm
I
just
look
saying.
after my house just fine. I'm just saying, people break in. That's what thieves do. They find all creative ways. Listen, isn't there like Tom Cruise movies, I believe they are, made out of breaking into places and stealing stuff? With all due respect, and that
White people
Mission
seeing stuff.
Impossible? Huh?
I said, white people seeing stuff.
Whole entire movies about the complexity and celebrating almost the thieves that break into these art museums. Da Vinci Code, da 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 da. There's millions of them. What you tell me? What you saying? What you said? Racist. It's just racist. Pure racism. I'm sorry, but it's just pure racism. All right, let's move on to our next story, which is fun. The royal family are being investigated again. The future King Prince Charles of England accepted a suitcase with 1 million euros in it. A report claims that's not the entire report. The report claims that he accepted 3 sets of suitcases, in some case plastic carrier bags from Fortnum Mason, with in excess of 3 million euros. Now, no one is suggesting, the reports are not suggesting that this was illegal. That's not what they're suggesting. But they're just going to double check that the money went to where they said it was going, because it was donated by the former Qatari Prime Minister. And these donations were made to his charities. And so, according to the Prince's house, Clarence House, this cash was then passed on to the charities immediately, and it was processed properly in the book. So we can all rest assured that the Qatari former Prime Minister was not buying favors, that Prince Charles was not being bribed, and that, life as normal. I'm just going to roll my eyes. I think I really needed to say this one because it just really made me so annoyed. I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing, really? All right, do you have anything to say about this one?
Yeah, so they're investigating it. Who's carrying out the investigation? The Israeli government, NYPD, because let's be real here. These people investigate themselves, and hey, surprise, we found no evidence of wrongdoing.
Yeah, indeed. Sorry, I have a little tickle in my throat for some reason. I don't know why.
But to be honest, I don't understand why people are upset. Because if you couldn't keep track of your money that you were entitled to, I'm just saying, isn't that the line that the British government's going with these days? So, look,
You're trying to kill me here. You're trying to kill me. That's hilarious.
Look, let's be real here, right? This is rich people mess, right? First of all, we talk about handing over briefcases full of cash. I mean, what is this, a spy movie or something? The minute you're handing over a briefcase full of cash in today's society of digital money, you know something's going on. That's just the bottom line of it. If somebody came and handed me $1 million worth of cash in a suitcase, I'm just going to be like, what crime is it you want me to commit?
Yeah. Well, yeah, indeed. Well, yes. It concerns me that while they're all saying the correct things, of course, we do understand that rich people's mess involves bribery, involves looking the other way, involves all kinds of shady activity.
Let's call it corruption.
Government corruption. Yes, there you go. And so therefore, if you're talking about 3 million, might be a drop in the ocean to the former Qatari Prime Minister. But 3 million is still a sizable chunk of money that you're throwing at someone in cash, in carrier bags from Fortnum and Mason. It doesn't bode well for politics within the UK, if that is what is happening, if you ask me. And on that note, we're going to our next story, which is a political story out of the UK, and it's the elections. There were some local elections that were happening last week in the UK, and they are some big losses for the Tory government. And there are 2 stories that are on the back of this. So one is the fact that the Tories have lost so many seats that they formerly held, but also the Labour Party regained seats that the Tories had won off of them in the previous elections, like Wakefield. That was a huge turn around back the other direction again. So that's now returned to, or it has gone Labour again. So there was this whole, we did a piece on this, the wall changing.
Yeah, but it's not the Wakefield seat. Forget the Wakefield seat. That's a minor thing. It's the other one. The one.
Tiverton and Honiton.
Yeah, that's the
Tiverton,
big.
I'm coming, man. I'm coming.
All right.
Tiverton and Honington went to a Lib Dem in a landslide. And so the Conservatives have faced huge losses to two different parties, actually. And I think that that's really important to put forward, that it's really quite interesting to see that Lib Dems have managed to gain ground again, considering that the last alliance they had with the Tories had really just taken them out of the running over the last 2 elections, and now seem to be able to recover at least some of their credibility. They're gaining seats again, and people are diversifying who they're voting for. They're moving away from the 2-party system and the main 2 parties, and are again looking at actually what are the local needs, and does this party serve the local needs? It also has to be said that it's not surprising that Boris Johnson is losing seats, because the majority of people who are polled do not support him and his party. There are lifelong Conservatives who are angry that this man is still their leader, who are disappointed that he's not made good on any of their promises. And then, I hope I've got it, because there's these brilliant statistics out on on what happened, and I was just like, are you kidding me? It was hilarious. So let me just see if I can find them. So you give your opinion while I find these statistics.
Right. So here's the thing. It appears that in order to be a member of the Tory party, you have to be some kind of con man or crook or criminal. But yeah, anyway, that's another story. Nope, that's something else. In regards to this election story, for me, it's the Cornwall, or was it Devon seat? Tiverton and whatever seat.
Tiverton and
Honiton, because that has been a Tory seat. That has been a Conservative seat for I don't know how many decades now. Like, that's something that they held for so long. But when you understand, for the Conservatives to lose that seat, that was a 40-something point swing. Right. So the Red Wall one, yeah, look, it was highly likely Labour would regain that soon enough, because it's historically been a Labour seat. But for the Tories to lose a 40-something points and have it swing, for me, that's more a sign of, as you say, there are traditional Tories that are upset.
Yeah.
But it's a sign that actually the Labour and Lib Dem voters there were voting strategically as into how to remove the Tory from office. And I think you're probably going to see a lot more of that as the elections, or when the elections approach. You talk about the Labour regaining, what was the word you used? Or people regaining trust in Labour seeming as a viable alternative.
Well, I said that about Lib Dems. They were regaining trust in Lib Dems, which I think is a really huge thing, considering, and I say it again, the fallout from the last elections, when Lib Dems got into bed with the Conservatives, there was a coalition government.
That's about 2 or 3 elections ago.
2 or 3 elections ago, but that fallout has lasted 3 elections, right? We're on the 3rd election cycle from that. And, I still have that in the forefront of my mind, that there were many young people who voted in that and who are now voting as adults, but who have returned to voting for Lib Dems, which will tell you the devastation and the harm that has been caused, I think, by the Tory government, right? And I think it's important for us to recognize that they're not living by their ethos, their values, or anything. I mean, or they are living up to their ethos, their values, and everything, or however you want to say it, whichever way around you want to say it.
Do you know, it's surprising, because there was the ex-chairman of the Conservative Party, of the Tory Party. He came out, it was either this week or last week, and he was like, look, this is not the Tory Party. He's like,
it was this week. Quit.
No.
This was another one?
This is the one an ex-chairman, and he
Okay.
came out and he said, "This is not the Tory party. These people are being held hostage by Boris Johnson."
Mm.
And he talks about them, so many of the people that are currently in power, or the fact that the backbenchers of the Tory party are in open revolt, which is shown by the vote of no confidence results that took place the other day. So a lot of them are in open revolt, but he is being propped up by the cabinet. And what he went on to actually say was that he fears for the future of Britain because what he calls Boris Johnson's government was an English populist government. And if it continues, it will lead to the breakup of the British Union. And this is something that we've spoken about time and time again, that, he's very much a populist leader. And it is so English centric that it works to the disadvantage of everyone else.
Yeah.
And this is what a traditional Tory is saying, because he's, as I said, he's saying, look, this isn't the party I was a part of. It wasn't so English focused. It wasn't so. It's become so nationalistic.
Yeah, and individualistic. And I think that, for us who are watching on, for the, when you're looking at this, you have to remember that it's not just England. There is England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. And the best way to look at this in some ways is, how do those countries vote when it comes to really critical issues? So like when we had Brexit, all of the other countries voted to stay in. It is England that took us out. And quite frankly, it's quite interesting that you would weight it so heavily towards, they just went with that vote as if 3 other nations didn't count. Their vote didn't actually carry and count. And so what you're looking at is this idea then that England is becoming more and more dominant within the narrative of the United Kingdom, which is really deeply disturbing. And again, you will see this as the Scottish National parties, because it's not always just the one party, the Welsh parties and the Northern Irish parties are trying to gain more devolution from the Prime Minister, from the
central government.
Thank you. And trying to get more power for themselves, which is what is happening, because Boris Johnson really consistently does only care about being propped up in that populist way that he is. And so overall, I think it's quite negative for the overall outlook of what could potentially happen in the future. And I think if you're a Christian, you need to just keep your eyes open and keep peeled, and be a little bit less populist and a bit more thoughtful about how we vote. Just saying. But I wanted to do this because this was really fascinating to me. So the BBC, who I think have really been propping up Mr. Johnson, they have not really taken him to task, published a news article, which I found quite surprising. They buried it a little bit, but I found it. It was on the 10th, and they published a news article of how many pledges do you think that Boris Johnson has actually kept? And so they started with GPs and nurses. The pledge was for 50,000 more nurses and 6,000 more GPs. They have not even touched the GPs. They are in the hundreds in the GPs. They have done half the number of nurses. However, the number of vacancies has almost doubled, it seems. They're pledged to build 40 new hospitals over the next 10 years. Another 8 hospitals have been added to that, have not actually been announced. They've not actually done anything. So currently, they have one new hospital. There are 22 rebuilding projects. 12 are new wings within existing hospitals. So they're trying to make it sound as if they're building something new, when in actual fact, they're just tacking on to the hospitals that really already exist and that are overstretched and overpushed, as we know, within the system. They pledged 20,000 more police. That's a controversial one because they're numbers are doing quite well in employing new police. However, you have to ask yourself, the laws that they've been creating around policing, how devastating are the effects of those laws going to be?
Well,
So that they're managing to do.
I think there's another question that needs to be asked in this, and that is, what is the overall loss of numbers to policing in the time of the Conservatives' tenure? Because
And I
what
can
they're
tell you
talking
the
about,
numbers. So they want to add 20,000 more police. They lost 20,545 police.
right?
So your employing is not covering what you're losing. Okay, anyway, just letting you know. Just letting you know. To answer your question.
Yeah, I said that was going to be my point. Like they're not even replacing what they cut.
Nope.
And when we say loss, we're not talking about loss of numbers to retirement, et cetera. We're talking about numbers that they cut intentionally.
Yes.
Right?
It says that they are actually all conservative cuts under conservative governments.
Right.
There you go.
Now, just to add another point to this, you said that the BBC, it was hidden on the BBC, and they're not holding him to task. There's a reason for that.
Hold him to task at
No,
all.
but there's a reason for that.
Yes, of course.
Who's the chairman of the BBC?
Oh, I've forgotten his name. He's a conservative.
Right? He's not only a Tory donor, but he was an advisor to Boris Johnson whilst he was mayor of London. And he was also an advisor to Rishi Sunak.
And that is why. So they've pledged 300,000 homes per year. And they're not meeting that number either. They pledged to get Brexit done. Well, they're about to get taken to court by the EU, so I don't think we can say they got Brexit done. But, by all accounts, Brexit is done. They pledged to have no checks on goods going from Great Britain to Northern Ireland and Northern Ireland to Great Britain. Now, we know the problems that are happening there. They pledged to have an Australian-style points-based immigration system that still has not been delivered. They pledged no rise in rates of income tax, national insurance, or VAT. Most of our viewers will know that their national insurance was due to go up, and in most cases went up in September. So that's broken. They pledged to fix the crisis in social care. We could do a whole show on how badly social care in the United Kingdom is going. So on and so forth. The spending on international aid is down. It's been reduced. So they were supposed to spend 0.7% of GNI on international aid. Instead, they're only spending 0.5% of GNI. That's gross national income, for those of you that don't know, on international aid. International aid is an important part of fixing the problems that you made in the world. I think people need to understand it in those terms. International aid is fixing the problems that your colonial powers made. Do the right thing. COVID. Well, there were lots of pledges made about COVID, but he kept one promise. He said, some of your grannies are going to die, when he made his first statement, and he did keep that promise. And unfortunately, many of us know people who have been lost in the pandemic. He claimed that there was going to be the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe. Lost. Claim the fastest growth in the G7. Not lost. What promises has this man made that he has kept? On every front, it's been a loss, a failure, and the only things you can marginally say he's doing are things that they already did badly that they're not even touching fixing, like the policing issues. Come on. I mean, it's just ridiculous, but we still have him. But what's fascinating will lead us on to our next story. This story was kind of interesting. I have to find it now. It's about the YouGov report. Have you guys seen this? YouGov is just... where is it gone? Where has my YouGov report gone? Now I have to find it. Where's my YouGov report gone? Please don't have disappeared. I have you here somewhere.
In a nutshell, while you're still for it, and you can give them more details. What happened was that the CEO of YouGov went on Twitter, and he did this long Twitter thread about how his job was threatened if they didn't pull or block a favorable poll towards Labour in the last election. Now, what makes this so interesting is because actually one thing that they say is now is that polls can influence the outcome of an election.
Yes.
Right. So that's one of the things that I'm not going to go into that now because that's not the point of the story. But not only did it influence the outcome of the election, the last election, but one of the founders, and I believe he's still a board member, is a current Tory minister by the name of Nadeem Zahawi. And it is Zahawi that called Chris Curtis, or this is what Chris Curtis has said, that called him and threatened his job if this story went ahead. So the government minister, acting government minister, is getting involved in this and seeking to influence the election.
So Nadeem Zahawi's official line is, "This was clearly a joke between two friends who had previously been business partners for several years. Stephen continues to be one of my closest friends, and at no point since leaving YouGov in 2010 have I had any influence on the company. Suggesting otherwise is untrue. This has forced Stephen Curtis to retract or clarify his statement and say that it clearly was a misunderstanding, and he wrote in a personal capacity, not on behalf of the whole company. And even though the poll was pulled because it was clearly the methodology used to put the poll out there was incorrect, Jeremy Corbyn had won by a landslide the actual debate, and they had to change the methodology to force it to be Boris Johnson, even though that was untrue and blatantly untrue if you had watched the debate. As you say, these polls can often determine how people vote. So it's quite interesting. And I think this is one that we need to pay attention to as Christians, because the politics of it all is very interesting. It's really fascinating. And I find it really interesting, of course, and the kind of conflict and corruption and, you know, these backroom deals that are going on. But here's something that you guys need to really pay attention to. You're watching the debate and you're listening to it. You're seeing and you're hearing with your own eyes and with your own ears. And if you had seen and watched the debate, you would have formed your own opinion. But what is happening is, instead of relying on, actually, I've gone this way and I've done that, and maybe discussing it with people who know and who you trust and who you go to, you're looking at the popular information that's coming out. Popular information that is often corrupted, one-sided, pushed on an agenda. You're not interrogating the information you're being told. So even though, you know, saying Jeremy Corbyn won by a landslide means that he wiped out the rest of the people that were standing there. He really did a good job. So it's not like by accident you would have realized that. You would have known, you could have heard it, you could have seen that he was doing a good job. The fact of the matter is, when somebody then tells you he's not doing a good job, did you ask yourself why that person made that statement? Did you interrogate the information that's being given to you, or did you just go, well, the internet said it, so it's true? Or YouGov, which is supposed to be independent and supposed to have, you know, a good handle on polls, etc., and trustworthy, so therefore they could never say anything wrong. Clearly, I must have misunderstood something. Did you doubt yourself and then put it all on trusting somebody else? And I think in the 21st century, when there are so many news outlets, and this is proven time and time again, each news outlet has its own political agenda. It has its own political slant and leaning. To not interrogate the idea that's being put forward is really, it's lazy and it's dangerous. We need to be more proactive in actually interrogating the ideas that are being put forward. People are getting sucked into really ridiculous conspiracy theories when this stuff is just on the top. You don't have to go find a conspiracy. This literally happened and is being reported in the news, right? diversify the outlets so that you're getting a more reflective position on what is happening. You can't go to the extremist outlets and think that this is enough. So this one, I think, really touches a nerve with me, because I feel like it's the thing that we try to do here is educate people about what's happening behind the stories and behind the scenes, particularly as it pertains to race and questions, and ask people to ask the question of what are your bias, what are your immediate things. But this applies to how you even vote, how you receive information about voting. Are you actually listening? Are you looking? And are you interrogating the idea? My 2 pennies.
Well, in a Christian context, because that's one of the things that you led that last segment on, I would simply say the Bible says even the very elect will be deceived.
Right.
Right. So that's it within a Christian context. But one of the things that I want to point out is just how unbelievable this reasoning is. And you can clearly see that this man has had pressure put on him, because Zahawi says he's a good friend and colleague that he's worked together with for 7 years or something like that.
Several years was
Okay,
his
several years. But this good friend and person you worked with for several years can't tell when you're making a joke. This person decided to get on Twitter and put out a whole long thread. Now, this is how Twitter works. You have a certain amount of characters and another tweet, right? And yes, there are apps and software that can combine them. Who knows if he has that? The point is, you have to put it all together, and then you have to press send. He went through the whole effort of typing up this long Twitter thread and was so sure he decided to press send.
And he doesn't run a company that isn't based on words. Like, let's be really clear about this. His company that he is the CEO of is actually based on looking at data. That is exactly what it's based on. It's not based on airy-fairy kind of opinion pieces. And so YouGov is supposed to be a database thing. So you're not going to write an entire thread without having the wherewithal to actually assess, actually, this is the correct information and I'm sending it out. And the fact that the way that Zahari has to actually defend himself is by saying, well, it's a misunderstanding between friends, lets you know you fully said that. And the misunderstanding was you got caught and your friend came out and outed you because he felt uncomfortable with that level of pressure. Now, we are talking about an election that's gone, but everybody in the UK is focused on the election that is coming. So at this point, this guy is probably shoring himself up to say, don't make that phone call again. Right? He's like, don't make a phone call when the new stuff comes, because I'm not doing this for you anymore. And you have to see it within the context of there are elections to cut. We've just had elections in which Conservatives have had losses, and now we're going to be having a general election, and people are saying these losses are going to carry over to the general election. So you have to understand that the person who's going to be running the polling is almost telling his friend publicly, I'm not here to be bought by you no more. I'm doing that. You can pretend to sack me, but times are changing. I'm not doing it. So I think looking at it within that context is also really important as well.
I wouldn't be surprised if YouGov has a new CEO come the next election.
We shall see.
Well, I'm just saying, when the BBC wasn't too favorable towards Johnson, what happened to their chair?
CEO. Yeah, new CEO. As I said, I've been very disappointed. And I think, as a person who follows the news, who keeps up to date with things, I've been very disappointed with the BBC's stance on dealing with the Conservative governments and looking at that. It's been very disappointing because they really have not reported, I think, accurately the news.
Yeah.
Because when you're reading it and when you're listening to it, you're missing things.
Well, you have to understand the context within this, because they were for years, the Tories for years have been threatening the BBC with taking away the license funding, which they're now moving towards doing, right? But because the threat of removing the funding wasn't helping them achieve their agenda within the BBC, they now put in a new chairman who can drive the agenda of the BBC.
Yeah.
right?
And these are the things that you have to listen with your ears, like those who have eyes, those who have listen, look. It's not difficult to find this information. And it worries me that people so easily just consume what they're being told, TikTok it through or Instagram it through, and are really not thinking about the information that they're being told and listening to people that are speaking on these issues, reading the information, looking at the statistics yourself, and actually unpacking this. And this is a story we're not going to cover, but I think within a Christian context, I really want to kind of point this out. A couple of years ago, there was a very famous within Christian circles, you understand, in America, in the Southern Baptist Church. So let me be specific about where the fame has occurred. Really famous teacher, leader, pastor in that church who did this piece. It was disgusting. He put out a tweet which basically said he saw a young black boy, probably the age of a late teenager, and he assessed this child. He didn't call him a child though, but he assessed this boy and realized that he was probably 70% likely to have a child out of wedlock. His babies are likely to be in abortion buckets, blah blah. He's going to be an absentee parent, right? This was his assessment based on the fact that he saw this teenager flip off a police when the police car had gone. That was his whole assessment of the whole child's life because he saw this one action, right? And what was interesting is he used this 70% likely statistic. He just said it as if it was fact. And everybody kept saying to him, you can't use, they kept tackling him on the fact that he determine the child's life beforehand. But what no one tackled him on, which I found really interesting and curious, is where did you get the statistic from? Says who? What is your underlying vision of black men and fatherhood? Because they are statistically the most involved fathers. Where do you get your statistics from to do with black fatherhood that you believe that there is a 70% absence rate and not a 70% involvement rate, which is actually what the statistics say. The stats say when they compared all the different ethnicities in the United States of fathers, it is black fathers and then Hispanic, I think, was next. And then basically all the ethnicities before you get to white people were the ones that were the highest involvement rates in their children's lives. Where are you taking your statistics from again? Maybe we need to question you on that first. We just instead assumed and accepted that because he said a number, that was a number. What makes that a number? You just pluck that number out of sheer thin air. No. Interrogate the idea that's being told to you, because that very assumption was undercutting, in my opinion, the value basis on everything. Because had people just attacked the number, you said 70% absence. Let me just give you a little report here that says that black fathers are more involved than any other father group in the United States of America. Here are the statistics. Keep going. So take that out of your mouth. You're already undercutting the person's argument because you've already put forward the evidence that they're wrong.
Yeah, and just for anyone who's going to watch this and say, what are you talking about? Well, this is where I'm going to plug the earlier shows. If you go back through the catalog, you'll find a Darkside show in which we went through the information and gave sources and everything on that.
Absolutely.
So there are receipts for everything we're saying.
We do have receipts, it's true. I can do that. So yes, there was a dark side on fatherhood indeed. All right, we don't have much time, but there are two massive things that happened this week that we need to get to. Huge, humongous things. It's interesting for a number of reasons, and I think that people kind of need to buckle in and deal with this the best we can. Now, I will always say that America probably has the best propaganda machine of the whole entire world, because somehow, no matter how bad things are there, people still look at the USA as if they're world leaders. I cannot understand how this developing nation has managed to get that position. On the UN's own website, when they have done the assessment of the USA, it is at the biggest poverty gap, biggest poverty wealth gaps, worst housing, worst poverty issues. It just ticks all the boxes. Again, look at the earlier shows because you will see this. Now, this particular issue, there are two issues this week. unless you've been hiding under a rock, you will know that have happened. One is the gun control issue. There were 2 different rulings this week on gun control. The first ruling was done by the Supreme Court in order to overturn local governments' rights to set laws, particularly places like New York, which have upped the strength of their gun laws since there have been more mass shootings, and have done a lot to actually eradicate mass shootings within New York. And so they have worked really hard on that. But there are a number of states throughout the United States who have managed to take the local power, devolved government power that they have, and improve the laws surrounding that. And the Supreme Court overturned that in one foul swoop and said that it is unconstitutional for them to do this. It just is shocking. And on the other hand, Joe Biden finally gets to sign into law landmark gun control bill on a national level. Now, we could argue all day about whether it should be stronger, whether it should be better, but this is the first time they've been able to pass a bill on gun control in 30 years. As much as I would hope for better things, as much as I want for better things for the people that live there, as much as I want you to be free and to live without fear of being shot everywhere you go, I mean, 30 years you haven't been able to sign anything. This is monumental that under this government they've been able to sign at least some things. The reforms include stronger background checks for younger buyers, under 21-year-olds. I would have hoped that that was something different, but okay, look, it's one step at a time. We have to celebrate the wins where they get them. They put in place a $12.2 billion or $15 billion program for mental health programs and school security upgrades. Again, I may have wanted something slightly different, but it's something.
Well, no, I mean, to be honest, I'm actually in favor of that part of the bill.
Yeah.
But that's only if the majority of it goes towards the mental
health funding. Yeah, but that's what I said. I would have rather it been 15 billion for mental health programs for schools, young people, etc. I would have preferred that than, I'm not saying it's a big step, right? I'm not knocking it. It is a big step for a country that hasn't been able to pass this kind of legislation for 30 years. This is huge. But nevertheless, I think we need to also say where the next legislation needs to be, right? This is the first step. Baby steps y'all need to do. And the next legislation has to be in slightly different. They've encouraged funding to encourage states to implement red flag laws to remove firearms from people considered a threat. Encourage states after the Supreme Court said what they said. It's really shocking. Closing the so-called boyfriend loophole by banning all those convicted of domestic abuse from owning a gun, not just those who are married to their victims or live with them. Okay, so there are a lot of changes within this. It's not just a few things, but those are the bigger issues. What was interesting to me is that they put up kind of a percentages of comparisons to the rest of the world and why the rest of the world is struggling. And I don't know if anyone saw the Margaret Taylor Greene, her name is, the politician out from the States.
Taylor Greene.
Right, and she was being interviewed or challenged in an interview by a Channel 4.
During reporter question time.
Right, was questioning her. And the drivel that came out of her mouth was frightening. It was really frightening. She's elected to someone's government. I was like, you might as well elect me.
You think that's frightening? You think that's frightening? Imagine this. You're living in an area with people that are dumb enough to elect her. That's the frightening.
Like I said, frightening that this woman has managed to get elected to be in office when that drivel came out of her mouth. Maybe you and the rest of the world with your lack of guns and your lack of gun violence don't understand this, but we Americans, we love our guns. Are you listening to the words coming out of your mouth? Do you think before you speak? Anyway, so international comparisons, okay? This is of gun-related killings as a percentage of all homicides. Of all the homicides. In the USA, 79% of all homicides are by gun. In the UK, It's 4%. In Canada, it's 37%. In Australia, it's 13%. And bear in mind that mass killings are lower in those countries because they don't have guns. So finding those statistics is really like, are you people mad? 79%.
Well, here's the thing.
Anyway,
I was going to say,
no one's saying that people don't get killed in other countries. Of course they do. People are people are people. Absolutely. People are people. But when you have access to automatic weapons in a local area where there is no war, there is no reason, and a gun serves no other purpose than killing, what are you doing? How is this even a thing? But they've at least passed a law. They've passed a law, Jeremy.
well, I think it's first of all, I want to say that it's a fallacy that there aren't guns in the UK. You can get a gun license in the UK.
Yes.
It's just that you have to go through a long process. I can't just suddenly walk into a gun store and buy one. Right? I don't walk into my grocery store and, hey, it's apples, it's pears, it's carrots. Oh, look at this. It's a gun rack.
Right.
You know, and that doesn't happen. That's first of all. But secondly, before you get it, you have to apply for the license. And there's a period in between. Then the police have to vet you. And then the police come to your house and make sure you have somewhere secure to keep the gun. And then there's another gap period. And I believe the police come back to your house to check you and make sure everything's okay before you can get a license for a gun. So it's not that the UK doesn't have guns. It's just that they're just not given to anybody and everybody who is not responsible enough to own a gun. And considering that, you know, people voted for Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and a whole bunch of others, I'd say that pretty much a large section of the USA are not responsible enough to own a firearm.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, there were other things about this story that I can't remember that I wanted to speak on, and I'm also mindful of the time. I think it's troubling that the U.S. has struck down the state's attempts to restrict access to firearms, not prevent, restrict. Because I think what they are going to do is use that as a precedent to strike down the federal law as unconstitutional. And I think you need to be mindful of that's a direction in which they're probably going to take this. And this is actually a preemptive ruling that they can rely on for when they go to look at the federal law.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's really disturbing. I think that it's disturbing that, you know, when you talk to people, they can't actually stop, listen, and hear that weapons of mass destruction, like AK-45s and whatever else machine gunnery you have out there, I wouldn't even like to hazard a guess, is not something that you need. Is not something that you need. Full stop. You just don't need it. It's not necessary for your life. The fact that you can't see that, because like at the end of the day, as you say, all other countries, every country has a ruling about guns. It's not that you can't have a gun. It's that there are ways and you have to go through lots of checks, lots of assessments, and then there has to be an actual reason why you want a gun. So most countries have some kind of gun hunting policy. And the reason that they want a gun is for a hunting policy. That's generally the reason that people have them. So farmers and people who go hunting for animals, whatever, I don't agree with, whatever. But there is you had to have a real logical reason why it's necessary. In the USA, it's my constitutional right. I think the mind boggles for other places because we don't, that's not what is a constitutional right. Like I want a human right to have a home, to have water, to have access to education. I want the human rights. It's my constitutional right to have a gun. And this really ties in with like the rest of the Roe v. Wade story that we're going to get to. And I know it's late, but I really think we should.
Yeah.
you know, because this idea of constitutional rights versus actual human beings' lives is really disturbing. It's my constitutional right to do this, okay, but it's the Supreme Court's rights to not only turn back Roe v. Wade, but then turn around and say, we're going to turn back contraception. We're going to tell you what to do with your body, but you can hold a gun. What?
Well, for me, it's just the concept. And I said, it's just a difference in societies. And some people say, well, you know, there's some things good about some societies, there's some things bad. You shouldn't condemn a society, but actually they're pretty happy to condemn certain societies, right? So I'm just going to
return Nigerian art pieces back to Nigeria. You're happy to condemn them.
It's not even that. It's not even that. They're condemning the fact that a bunch of Muslim countries banned the new Buzz Lightyear thing, right? And they call it backwards, right? It's not a civilized society. They banned it because it featured a kiss between two same-sex characters. Now listen, whether I agree with that or not, neither here nor there. The fact is you're condemning it. Here's the thing.
But hold on. Can I just say something, Mr. Storm? Just there's this little point just here. How you go and condemn them when you are trying to pass a law that repeals same-sex marriage?
Anyway.
Pot calling the kettle black much? Anyway. What are you talking about?
The point I'm trying to make, it's okay, that the rest of the world is looking at the US and condemning it and calling it backwards because you consider the right to own a gun as constitutional. It's a right that I have. But you don't believe that people should have a right to healthcare. For the rest of the world, or for a lot of the rest of the world, we are looking at that and being like, y'all are backwards.
Yeah, absolutely.
You would rather have the right to have an instrument that could kill someone or harm someone than have the right that could help someone and heal someone and save someone.
Yeah.
Now, if that is not ass backward, I don't know what is.
Yeah, the mind does boggle, and I think now if I add, because of course, you know, everyone knows that I'm a pastor on this particular platform, so of course, now if I add the Christian element to this, what I do not fundamentally, and I do not want anyone to explain it to me, because I don't want to understand it. What I cannot understand is, and I don't even think I want to understand anymore, because I have tried to be listening and compassionate and understanding because we share the same faith. I cannot understand how someone who shares the same Bible, the same Jesus, the same Christian name is so gung-ho about this that they would rather have guns than healthcare. It, to me, I listen in Christian circles from the United States and I hear people saying after every shooting, should we have armed people come to our police? I'm like, should you run a healthcare clinic to look after the people in your local area? Just saying.
Right. I just need to correct you. I need to correct you there, right? Because you're talking about these people that are Christian and you're saying you share the same Christian name and they share the same Bible and you share the same this and that. All of that is true, but you're wrong. You don't share the same Jesus, because I assure you their Jesus has blue eyes and blonde hair.
Okay. Jesus doesn't have blue eyes and blonde hair. No, indeed. Yeah, indeed. I mean, you shared with me a post about this issue, but my heart breaks because I think it's so divisive. It's such a divisive issue within Christian circles. It is such a divisive issue outside of Christian circles. Like people who hear that I'm a pastor. Do you know how many times I've almost had to apologize for being a Christian and a pastor in my professional capacity? Because when people say, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a pastor. And they've just been like, oh my gosh, can you believe this, that, or the other? And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not like them. I'm a pastor who actually believes in the Bible and the Jesus of the Bible, and who believes that we should be in a community with people and looking after people and not banning people and putting them in cages and shooting them and giving health. I believe in healthcare. And, you had to almost qualify the kind of Christian you are to the world because of this aspect of very loud American, USA. In fact, let's not just say American, because there are the Americas is bigger than the USA. Southern particularly, but it spreads. White Christianity is so gung-ho that, the celebrations from Roe v. Wade from that circle is the most appalling thing. We're pro-life. How can you be pro-life when you put women's lives on the line, when you override doctors' choices?
Are you talking about Roe v. Wade now, or still the...
I kind of gone into Roe v. Wade because I'm just like, because of the Christian thing, it bothers me that you want to have this gun right so badly, and you want to celebrate your pro-lifeness so badly that you are willing to sacrifice children's lives, women's lives, people of color's lives, your own kids' lives, because like gun violence affects everyone. Like, what? How is this a thing? Like, what is wrong with you? How do you read the same Bible and come to the conclusion that you should be shooting people? How is this? How do you read the healings that Jesus does and come to the conclusion that you should be excluding people from healthcare? What is going on in your head? It leaves me with no words, except for the fact that we still have to talk about Roe v. Wade. Okay. Roe v. Wade.
All right.
Okay. The Supreme Court finally overturned Roe v. Wade. For those of you who have been following the United States information, you will have noticed that this has been a conversation for a number of years. It has been intensifying, particularly within the last presidency, and has now come into this presidency, and Roe v. Wade has finally been overturned. The rejoicing that happens in the street was heartbreaking. The tears that happened in the street was heartbreaking. It wasn't enough for them to say they were overturning Roe v. Wade. They then said they were coming for other decisions, such as the contraceptive decisions, such as LGBTQIA rights. Somebody pointed out, and pointed out by you, and I also saw a number of articles and a number of commentaries online that, Loving and the Loving case, Loving and versus the
Loving versus Virginia.
Loving versus Virginia, plus so that was the rights of interracial marriages. Brown v. the Board, which is the rights of integrated schools, are all things that have now been put back on the table because of the manner in which this particular ruling has been done. It isn't just that they overturned it, it is how they've overturned it and why they've overturned it that is particularly disturbing.
I just want to speak to the fact that this is a highly political agenda. And as soon as it was done, you had John Cornyn. He's a U.S. Senator from Texas. He tweeted that it's now time to come for Plessy versus Ferguson and Brown versus the Board of Education. And that deals with segregation issues, right? And this is what people need to understand, that this was always the plan.
Right? Make America Great Again was always about returning
but it goes back even further, because the whole point of when you look at, when we speak about Southern Christianity within the USA, they weren't concerned about abortion. right? But when you go into the history of it, you look at the fact that
Yeah.
abortion was used as a tool, and they always said it was a tool. It was
Mm.
politicized, it was used, and you can, as I said, this is all documented stuff that you can find out. But a bunch of prominent ministers and
Mhm.
politicians got together and they said that they could use abortion as a vehicle to turn back the advancement of rights, particularly civil rights, right? So you have to understand this whole concept of abortion was not an issue within um, Southern Christianity in the USA like 30
Yeah.
years ago,
No. Nope.
right?
Nope. Yep.
So what you're seeing expressed by the senators and the politicians
Yep.
is actually the true motivations for this whole thing of overturning Roe versus Wade. And I know people will be like, yeah, it's Texas, because nothing good comes out of Texas or Florida. Um, so, people will be like that. But actually, no, this has just been the overall political agenda,
Yep.
and one which the Republican Party has driven wholeheartedly towards and into, to overturn civil rights.
It has. I mean, my only consolation is that in the Netherlands this week, in the past weeks, they have literally just solidified into law that abortion is fully within the realms of your doctor. And they have just made moves that it will be your GP, your general practitioner, or your house art, or whatever the words are you use in your country for your
Family doctor in the U.S.
doctor, who will be able to not only administer but refer you to the correct places if needed, but can administer and help you in the first instance of early abortion rights. And so my only saving grace, I guess, this week is that I found that out. Like I was just like, and I think people need to understand, you know, being for the fact that a lot of people will say, well, you pastor, you shouldn't surely believe that people should terminate pregnancies. What I surely believe is that people have the right to determine their own bodies. And it is not my right to step in and tell them what to do, number one. Number two, biblically speaking, and here it gets really interesting. In the Bible, there are different rules that surround the death of a fetus versus the death of a child. If you cause a woman to have a miscarriage or to lose a child, you just get a fine of a couple, you get a monetary fine. If you cause someone to, once a child has been born, to lose a child, life for a life, there is clearly a difference in the biblical narrative that supports the idea that what happens in a woman's body is between her doctor and her conscience and God. It is not your right to step in. And I have counseled people, I have held the hands of, I've cried with the people. I am, what my opinion is of what I would do is irrelevant to the fact that when husbands, mothers, fathers are having to make choices about a woman's life is on the line for a child, for a fetus, is very different and not my place to tell them how to do that. That is the doctor who advises. It is not me who gets the right to do that. The fact that you have this is just, it's frightening that a country could repeal this right. I mean, the clinics were closing, just...
Look, here's the reality. Well, first of all, listen, I'm going to put out this disclaimer. I'm not a qualified stockbroker or anything like that, but I am going to invest heavily in companies that produce red dye, because I expect full Handmaid's Tale to be taking place in the USA. And so I'm like, yeah, let me just get my investment in there. Some might say it's unethical, but hey. Um, yeah, here's the thing. Is anybody actually surprised
No.
that the Supreme Court voted to overturn Roe versus Wade when the US Senate voted to put on an alleged rapist on the Supreme Court. I mean, it's not really surprising that an alleged rapist would not be in favor of a woman having control over her own body, right? And so this whole thing, you need to look at it within this context. And there's certain members of that governmental body that just fundamentally oppose the concept that a woman should have control over her own body. And we know that he doesn't believe that women should have control over their own body because there are multiple allegations.
You know, and here's another layer to this. Oh no, sorry. Are you finished with that point? I don't know.
No, carry on.
Well, here's another layer to this. Those same said people were asked under oath if Roe v. Wade was to be held up, and said yes, under oath. Why is their job not on the line? Tell me that.
Well, actually, it should be.
Your job should be on the, because you lied under oath.
Yep.
Under oath that you weren't going to overturn Roe v. Wade, and then you turned around and you voted to overturn Roe v. Wade.
And I think another point that I want to bring out in this that I think is critically important is that when it comes to this decision, and when it comes to many of the laws regarding the banning of abortion in a lot of states in the USA, it is overwhelmingly white men that are making legislation and decisions on and enshrining in law things that solely affect women. Right? Because what man is having an abortion? Right?
Let's be clear. Because if your mistress was knocked up, you go fly her to wherever you need to get her whatever you need, because you got money to do that. You don't care about the rest of us.
No, but the point is the scandals have already been exposed in instances where they've done that, which shows that it's actually not an ethical or moral belief that they have. As I said, there are other reasons for it. But the point I'm making is that you're making decisions that will never impact your life. And because they don't impact your life in that way, you're really not qualified to make those decisions. That will be like saying, well, you know what? Or let's flip it on its head, that the majority of people that were in government were women, and they passed legislation on whether men should have vasectomies or not. Right?
I mean, statistically, you can have more babies than I could ever have, so it seems like a logical step.
So you get to 35 and they're like, that's it, you're done. We're making a law where you have to have a vasectomy.
You're only allowed to have 2 children, and then the vasectomy happens.
You know, or worse than that, you can't have sex after the age of 25 without a vasectomy. You know, things like that. Men will be up in arms.
Men would be up
because a vasectomy is something that solely affects men.
Yeah.
And we will be like, well, how can you as a woman who never has to endure that process have all the control over the decision making and not let us have input into it? Right?
But we gave you like 2 token women on the 2 token men on the panel.
Listen, here's the thing, right? As a guy, I can tell you we are very protective over our bits. Right? And if you pass the law coming after our bits, I'm like, we'd be out in the streets. Right? And I actually don't mean, especially in the US, they're not coming out with placards like they are.
Guns, AKs.
They're coming out with their guns.
Everyone's life, every woman's life is on the line right there. Yeah.
You know, so I think we just need to have a bit of honesty surrounding this conversation and just be like, well, the people that it's truly affecting haven't really had a voice in this conversation discussion at all. And I recognize the irony of me speaking on this as a guy when it's a subject that affects women, you know. But the reality
My
is,
daughter.
I'm a guy, and in places and in spaces where women don't have the voice to express their concerns, then it becomes my responsibility to speak for those
Mhm,
without a voice.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, as I said, I think it's a really it's archaic. And the same people will turn around and say, look at those women in their burqas. They're being controlled by men. They should be free. To do what exactly? Live in the USA under those regimes where you're coming from my
Or France.
contraception, you're coming from my womb. I mean, that's physically inside of me. Are you insane? You don't have a right to the inside of my body. I mean, you want us to do what? You want us to listen to you? Because the hypocrisy, I think, is real. I think the as I said, every time the news breaks of something out of the USA, it never ceases to amaze me that yet still world leader, G7, G8. I'm like, y'all ain't got no business being anywhere. You're fix the problems in your own country. Stop going outside. Maybe that's the reason why you're going outside. Maybe the reason you keep fasting yourself up outside is because you have no desire to fix what's happening inside. You have every desire to continue to repeal people's rights within your walls, reduce them down to nothing so you can continue to manipulate and abuse. Because let's be honest now. Historically, this is a country that was formed by stealing land, stealing people, killing people, enslaving people, wiping out nations. That is how your country was formed.
Right.
And those ideals you have clearly still prevail to this day.
Right. And I just want to add to this. I said France for a reason, actually. And that's because I don't want anybody from Europe standing on their horses like the all high and mighty, and we're so much better than the USA in this regards, because France has really restrictive laws on women,
Yeah.
particularly Muslim women,
Yes.
or specifically Muslim women,
Yes.
and what they can wear when they go swimming.
Yes.
And there was a decision from the French courts just this week that upheld a ban on the burkini in a private swimming pool within a town. It was either this week or last week. So that's
Private.
why. Hmm?
Did you say private swimming pools?
Listen, yeah, but there's already a ban on public.
Yes,
There's
well,
already, right?
this I understood, but you said private swimming pools. This is
Yeah.
within the domain of I own this. I can sit in my pool how I want to sit in my pool. What are you
No,
saying?
no.
Hey, no.
In terms of like a private establishment
Okay,
is
oh, I see.
allowed to tell people you can't wear a burkini. So you're effectively saying you can discriminate against Muslim women that choose to show some modesty.
Like I said, when the law first broke, I said this then, and I will continue to
Mhm.
say this. As far as I'm concerned, all European women need to start wearing bikinis because, quite frankly, not just out of solidarity for the point that how dare you tell women what they can and cannot wear in a swimming pool? How dare you?
Oh,
So, I want to cover my body. So what? So what's it got to do with you? What does it have to do with you? Mind your business. Stop looking. What difference does it make to you? I want to expose my body, my business. I want to cover it, my business.
right.
Leave a woman's body alone.
And
It
I
is
think
not your business.
that's my point in this. European countries can't claim to be any better than the U.S. in this regards because there are European countries that seek to control and dictate how women dress, how they behave, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, I think the biggest travesty, especially as a guy, and having been to European beaches, is that you'll be telling women they can't cover up, but you got these guys out here and these budgie smugglers. I'm talking about they are getting their full not Ali G. What's
Oh my gosh. Oh,
character?
the mankini. They're
Yeah.
getting the mankini on.
What's the character's called?
I
Sacha Baron
don't remember the character. I just
Borat,
really.
right? You out here getting with guys getting the full Borat on, and that is somehow legal. I'm like, that's a crime against humanity.
Yeah. It's frightening. It's
And I sorry,
do you
I
know?
just want
Yeah,
I
go
just
on.
want to make another point. I find it extremely troubling. Okay, that in many countries, or in some countries, in France, for example, let's use France as a specific example. I find it extremely troubling that they will tell women how much not to wear on a beach.
Just
Right?
troubling.
You are telling people how much not to wear. In other words, you're saying we require X amount of nudity or of nude skin from you for you to use this establishment. Now, if you cannot see how that is exploitative, then I think you need to have your head checked. Because the reality is, it should be down to the personal choice of whoever is going to that beach to say, I want to wear this, I don't want to wear this. If I want to go into the ocean in a suit and tie, that should be my prerogative. And in fact, as a man, it is. There are no restrictions on what I can or cannot wear when I go to the beach in France.
Mm-hmm. Do you know, if I link two stories together, what disturbs me is that France, like many, many Western countries, has a problem with rape culture. Blaming women for men's inability to control themselves. So you have a prescription on how much flesh I have to show in order to have access to a beach. And then you're going to blame me if a man does something to me because I have flesh on show. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. It doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. It's completely illogical. You won't try convict rapists because the real reason someone rapes is because they are a rapist. They are a criminal. They are doing something illegal. It's got nothing to do with what I'm wearing. But you want to prescribe the amount of clothes I'm allowed to wear and then blame me for the amount of clothes I'm wearing.
And actually, I just want to make another point, actually, in that here's the thing. I don't understand why you have topless beaches, but then have laws against people walking around topless. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. Listen, I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed to nude beaches. If that's what you want to do, go ahead. But my point is simply this: that the whole view or aspect or the whole approach to nudity makes no sense.
Yeah.
Other than it is an aspect of control.
And always has been. And the Roe v. Wade and the gun control laws and every other story that we've spoken about has this thread of one dominant culture, whichever culture it is, trying to manipulate, control everyone else. And that is something that God does not want. Pure and simple. Pure and simple. We don't control other people. You know, like even biblically, God gives us free will, right? Y'all ain't got with free will yet. You haven't quite grasped free will. Oh, yeah. This dark side is definitely beginning to take its toll on me. Definitely talk about Roe v. Wade is hard because I think that a lot of people make assumptions based on the fact that we're both Christians and they would assume certain things about us. They would assume we're pro-choice in a way that is not how I would describe pro-choice, and they'd assume we were pro-life in a way that I wouldn't describe pro-life. You know, if you're pro-life, be pro-life, have healthcare. Women have to go into debt in the USA to have a baby. That doesn't. You're forcing a woman to have a baby, and then you're sending her into debt in order to do it. How much does a baby cost to have in other countries? not even a fraction of what it costs in the USA. In some places it's free, in other places it's a few €100. In other places you're looking at next to nothing to have a child. You go out to the USA, you are literally in thousands and thousands of dollars worth of debt in order
Yes,
to have
they
a
charge
child.
you to hold your baby for the first time. I mean, that's just a joke to me.
How you charge someone to have skin to skin contact when it's their skin and their baby? How you do? Anyway, so you know, be about. Anyway, I don't think there's any easy way of doing this. I'm pretty sure that this episode will come back and bite me in the backside at some point in my life. And do you know what? It is what it
Listen,
is.
you're a female pastor, so of course it's going to come back and bite you in the butt. Listen,
It is what it is. I stand by my point. My point is that you cannot dictate the rights of somebody to their own body. It is not right. It is not fair. It is not good to dictate that you control somebody's body.
yeah,
You have a controlling interest in whether I'm allowed contraception, whether I'm allowed to have an abortion, whether I'm allowed to do anything debt-free, whether I'm allowed to put clothes on, take clothes off. I mean, what kind of world are we living in? What is this? What is this? And then you in the USA want to do it in the name of Jesus. Please take Jesus' name out your mouth. I beg you.
listen,
Take
I
it
was
out your mouth.
I was on the cesspool that is Facebook today discussing this with someone,
Oh,
and I kid you not, I swear, just people that are
seem
happy
reasonable.
about no. The people that are happy about Roe versus Wade being overturned, I swear, are knuckle dragging Neanderthals that are incapable of understanding basic concepts. And I actually had to tell one guy today that what he was doing in using God to justify his position is the height and very definition of blasphemy. And it is based on a lot of what you said about the concept of choice. One of the first things God gave to humanity was choice,
Choice.
right? That was one of the, so the fact that you would do something which would override that is is like the definition of blasphemy. But also this concept of being pro-life. Okay, you're pro-life, but you're not pro-universal health care. You're pro-life, but you're not pro-passing laws to stop people going into primary schools and shooting little kids. You're pro-life, but you're not pro
Protection of
mental
what?
health services. You're pro-life until you see it was a black person shot in the back. You're pro-life. No.
Stops at life. Stops at actual breathing air, life. How is that a thing?
Listen, as I said, the dude thick, because he said this guy said to me, um, he said to me, life. He tried to explain what life was, and he used the fact or the concept of, first of all, the definition of life that he used was incorrect because he spoke about it, or he believes abortion is wrong, but actually a fetus, and especially a zygote, does not display the necessary factors of life. But okay, right? Let's assume that it did. If you're using that as a justification for why a fetus is alive, um, do you eat plants? Because plants display all the characteristics of life that he listed. No, because if you eat plants, you're a murderer, right? No, because there's more to life as a human, right? So I think that's one of the things for us to consider. And I think also, actually, just on another note, one of the pure hypocrisies of this is that one of the notions that's always passed is that a mother knows what's best for her child. This is the patriarchal society, right? Passes a notion that the mother knows what's best for her child, right? So when the mother says it's best that this child is aborted or this fetus is aborted, why don't you let her make that decision?
Oh, the hypocrisy is real. The hypocrisy is real. As I said, to ban abortion outright in all cases without any medical consultations, any like it just no caveats, no ifs, no ands, no buts. It is, you know, the women's lives that they're putting on the line is frightening, because of course we can all talk about the various reasons why somebody has an abortion, and there are multitudes, and they're difficult and they're painful and they are what they are, right? But there are also life-threatening reasons why fetuses are aborted, where the woman's very life is in danger because of what is happening with that pregnancy. And so what you are doing is saying fetus first, even though you know the fetus won't live, but it will kill that woman.
And sorry, I know I'm mindful of the time, but every time I think about this, there's new levels of trauma that will be added to so many women that I cannot fathom. So in a lot of states that have passed the anti-abortion laws, they still don't allow abortion in cases of incest and rape. Right?
Again,
so what you have to understand is, not only has a woman been traumatized through the initial action, she is now going to be forced to carry a child that she may not want to. But on top of that, here's the real kicker of the injustice. That rapist still has parental rights.
Oh, God.
Now, you're forcing this victim
to share custody.
And forcing the contact between her and the person that abused her.
Okay. So this is, you know, we have done a lot of topics. We have done a lot of dark side stuff. We are getting closer to the summer vacation, and I had to be honest with you, this is a day when I'm happy to say the summer vacation is coming, because I need to put this down. And I have the privilege to put this down because I am not a USA citizen. I don't live there. But I need, you know, we are going to have to fight. People around the world are going to have to join the fight. We're all going to have to band together to help 50% of the USA population to have autonomy over their own body. This isn't something that is just going to go away. Unfortunately, because of the USA's status in the world as world leaders, when these sorts of things happen, they have ripple effects across the globe. And if we don't start doing things within our own countries to ensure that that doesn't happen in our country, to ensure that women there have rights and women here have rights and have autonomy over their own bodies, we are going to end up in some very dark times across the globe. And it behoves us all to ensure that we do work harder, that we do educate our next generations, that we do find the information for ourselves, and that we do fight for the rights of humanity. It's a sad day. It is definitely a sad day. I have seen many tears, many heartbreaks. I've seen many people cuss out Christians, and I can understand why. I'm not here to apologize on their behalf because, quite frankly, they deserve to get cussed out. I am here to say it's not all of us, and they don't represent me, and they certainly don't represent the God of the Bible that I worship. It's the only thing I can say. This has been the dark side. Very painfully, this has been the dark side with Pastor Purple, TC Storm. We will see you next week with more dark side news, with more discussion topics. I'm sure you all will come back to us with more challenging ideas. There may be more Roe v. Wades at this point because there will be more stuff happening during the week. If you have a topic that you would like us to cover, please do let us know. We enjoy that. Please continue to interact with us in the comments. Please let us know how you are doing. If Roe v. Wade has affected you negatively, please do seek counseling from a local good provider. Please get help. You know, this is not a time to be isolated. It certainly is a time to speak to one another, just as we said, you know, a couple of years ago when we started the dark side with Black Lives Matter issues that we're still dealing with today. This really is about you protecting your mental well-being, going and seeking the help that you need, ensuring that these issues do not leave you hopeless, but remind us that we live in a fallen and broken world, really, and that we need to have something new. There must be a change. Mr. Storm, any last words?
Yep. Wakanda forever.
He's saying that in his Wakanda shirt, by the way, for those of you that don't realize that. He's wearing his Black Panther shirt very proudly. Y'all have a good... At least we can end with a smile. Y'all have a good one. We will see you soon. Till the next dark side. Peace out. Bye-bye.